You know, normally, I love it when my autistic obsession with the Brony community breaks into more mainstream commentary, but this particular drama is one that I very nearly didn't cover at all. Because when the allegations made by I Love Kim Possible a Lot against Saber Spark dropped, I was already aware of their connection to the wider Black Griffin drama, which, I'll be honest with you, is a complete bloody headache. Now, while this video won't go into detail about those allegations, understanding that wider drama which revolves around and indeed hinges upon persuading somebody's wife that their now husband groomed them is unfortunately the only way to actually explain why any of this happened at all. So while my long-term dodging of this story might make me a bit of a Johnny-come-lately, I've put in work over the last week or so to really unpick what's been happening behind the scenes to give you all a clear view of the insanity that's been occurring. And I do mean insanity, because what I have for you today is a drama that stretches back over a decade, all the way to the animation analysis community. I've heard your house described as the home for wayward bronies, to be fair to her.
Yeah, it was that way for a long time, until I got over it.
I'm kind of fascinated just hearing stories about her at cons. Was she just always this crazy?
Rachel? Crazy isn't the right word. Entitled is the right word. Clueless is the right word.
So welcome to the rabbit hole, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to show you what happened to all those people who used to unironically refer to themselves as horse famous. Let's get into it.
But sacrificing putting children at risk because you don't want to publicly speak out about this behavior.
Your fans aren't your peers.
Something better could come out of this if you fucking talk to us.
Firstly, given that this is a drama finding its origin points back in 2012, as you can imagine, there are a fair amount of moving parts and various parties who are involved. But my interest lies almost solely, at least at the moment, in the allegations being levelled against Saber Spark and frankly, how they were platformed in the first place. So, we're actually going to begin on May the 1st this year, when I Love Kim Possible a Lot, also known as KP, released a video she'd been working on for the last several months on DA Games. Now KP has been knocking around YouTube for a significant period of time, with the channel dating back to 2007, though she'd reached the height of her popularity in 2014, having started to gain traction in the Brony community in 2013. Now I have a soft spot for this little community because it's produced some fantastic dramas over the years. Regular viewers will be aware of my obsession with the creator from this community known as Toon Critic, who was caught trying to solicit nudes from a minor through My Little Pony erotic roleplay.
A Brony reviewer named Toon Critic Y2K, a person with whom I and many others have worked, has been engaging in sexually explicit chats with an underage girl. Many of us reacted with shock, confusion, anger, and sadness.
While cartoon analysis as a content bracket has expanded over the years, its origin and indeed its popularity can firmly be attributed to the insane popularity of My Little Pony, particularly amongst a certain demographic. This is of course also true of DA Games and Saber Spark, and the footage I'm using at the moment is from Saber Spark's own documentary on the Brony fandom, which he made to celebrate the community. While this all sounds very pleasant and nice, it probably won't come as a surprise to many of you that the history of the Brony fandom is basically a smorgasbord of allegations. And while this may sound slightly callous, it doesn't surprise me to watch this current drama unfold in the way that it has. Allow me to be blunt for a second. The allegations against Saber Spark and indeed DA Games do not exist within a vacuum. They form part of a long-running pattern for this particular fandom. Firstly, there is an inherent problem of the Brony demographic. We are talking about adult men who are obsessed with a child's cartoon show aimed at little girls. And that particular overlap attracted an awful lot of nonces into the community. But there is a secondary element which many of you will not be aware of, and it's the reason that we're even talking about this in 2025, considering it concerns events all the way back in 2012. The Brony fandom actively encouraged people who'd gone through abusive situations to forgive their abusers and shut the fuck up about it.
If we withhold forgiveness, it does not harm the wrongdoer in any way. I realize that forgiveness is not, and never was, for the benefit of the wrongdoer. It is for our own benefit. It is what enables us to finally release the anger, the resentment, the hurt, the poison that slowly turns our hearts black.
And that really wouldn't change until 2018, when Lio Convoy came onto the scene. Have I never mentioned that before? The cartoon analysis community is Lio Convoy's origin story. We'll come back to this in a bit because it's another piece in the puzzle which is going to become relevant later. But the relevance of that culture of silence that existed explains why we're now litigating these dramas years later, because any discussion of them at the time would have been quickly shut down. And it also became a bit of a trend for people with pre-existing grudges to happily run allegation stories on people they didn't like with fairly flimsy evidence. And yes, KP's video fits firmly within this trend. In fact, within KP's Discord, there exists an archived thread of safety reports. These safety reports are basically Google documents on people who are problematic within the community, be they child groomers or just slightly annoying. The idea being to spread awareness to the wider community or anyone who may come across these individuals. The video KP was doing on DA Games was a safety report. But it's probably helpful to you, and because I don't want to pick through a 2-hour video breaking it down, to just hear from KP herself regarding the timeline and motivations behind the video. Let's start giving just a brief background on how you ended up in the kind of... I know you've got a fairly long history with these kind of communities anyway, but why were you making a video about the DA group story in the first place?
Oh wow, you really don't know anything. So the original video was supposed to be about Chris. Chris was an ex-employee of mine that I found out made up a story about, to be blunt, jerking off to my clothes in a con and bragging about it. Was never told that story. So a whistleblower told me it. Confronted Chris, recorded that call. Chris admitted to it. Contacted DA Games and Saber to see if they were going to do anything. I contacted Saber through his employees because I don't really like Saber, but I felt like it was fair to give him a heads up. And same with DA. DA was, I think all those emails are in the video if you want to like find a mirror and get them there. But the DA emails were essentially, hey, seems like this is handled, like go away. And then I was like, well, we're going to release this publicly as a safety report. So like, do you have any comment? And then they started getting really frazzled, and they tried to use British law to convince me not to release it, even though the laws didn't make any sense.
Now I'd like to pause here for a moment, because the elements involving Chris deserve further examination. I've now heard that full call, and what was initially presented was an edited version of a much longer conversation. Within this longer conversation, Chris takes full accountability of his actions, he apologizes repeatedly, and makes clear notes of actions he has taken over the years to correct these behaviors. These communities talk an awful lot about people taking accountability, and that if people do take accountability and apologize for their actions, mostly they can just get on with their lives afterwards. So it confused me quite a lot to hear Chris do all the things you are meant to do and still be expected to face serious repercussions. We are talking about a single instance over a decade ago with seemingly no repeat behaviors. The idea someone should be fired over this is frankly absurd. And so I went back to KP to ask her about it. because I went looking through some of the Chris stuff, KP, and I mean I'll be honest with you, it's very difficult with the Chris stuff because what I've got your section in the video, which is a 2-minute cut, and that's a condensed version of the full call, which isn't noted as a condensed version in your video. And then I've listened to the full call, and Chris is highly apologetic, takes full accountability for his actions, explains to you that, you know, where he was at the time and the fact that he has sought therapy and to modify that behavior. He's not making excuses for it. He's literally just actually taking account. So I'm trying to understand why you felt it was necessary to make a video on him, or why he should be fired for something that happened a decade ago and he has apologized for.
I guess I just wanted a sense of accountability, if that makes sense. Like, I get your point, though.
It's very difficult, because what does accountability look like? I mean, again, he didn't actually assault anybody. He made up a weird story, which is very fucking weird, I agree with you. But he's, you know, if accountability is you should lose your job, your livelihood, and everything else, I mean, would you agree that's fairly extreme?
I think, like, maybe, like, some sort of statement from him, too, might have helped. Like, no, I get your point, though. Like, that this was a thing that happened and this probably damaged some relationships that I was working on at the time. And, that kind of sucks, but I see what you mean.
Because, I mean, I will say, like, from talking to a few other people who've been going over this, I mean, the Chris stuff is a point that's kind of come up again and again. It's like, you know, I see a lot of stories about people who are like abusers, who've like had sexual conversations around and with kids. I think there's a current drama going on over again, some stuff that happened like 5 years ago. And one of the particular people involved in that, you know, he's in trouble now because he's sort of pushing back after sort of acknowledging what he's done to this person. But the kind of prevailing thing is like, well, if you just said, yeah, that was a fuck up and I was a bit weird and I'm sorry, no one would care. But with Chris, you've got literally the reverse of that situation where he does admit it's a fuck up, says that he's sorry, and it's like, that feels like it's not enough 2 years later. So yeah, I kind of want to be clear about that, because I think that's something that you are going to catch flack for.
I think it was also... No, that's fair. I think it was also... I was frustrated, like, I think I wanted some accountability. I was frustrated with the responses I was getting, and I was frustrated that no one was, like, offering to help fix it. It was just more like, you know, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like, who holds them accountable?
What does fixing it look like to you?
Maybe some kind of public acknowledgement or something, because it had reputational damage, but also maybe like actually proving he went to have some sensitivity training or something, and not just saying that.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I mean, because when I watched through your video, he seems to say in his public statement, yes, this is a thing that happened and I needed to work on, and I'm sorry for. I mean, it was, you know, it's a very corporate statement in some regards. I think that's fair, but it's like, publicly, this was acknowledged as a thing that did happen with Chris, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think there is a spiraling element here that.
Oh, I should clarify that it was only acknowledged publicly. I felt he might be a little bit dangerous just because he was kind of lying about those kind of experiences, on top of when I looked into the DA game stuff too. I don't know if you've gotten there, but there's a lot of like gross behavior there. So it just seemed like these people weren't accountable for themselves as well. So I guess it became a bigger scope to me once Games was not really willing to work with me. And then once some of the game's victims found me and they were like, oh, this is a pattern because they do this kind of stuff all the time.
With that out of the way, I suppose we should get to the Saber Spark allegations themselves. Now, the way I want to break this down is I'm going to explain to you what the allegations were and how they were presented, and then I'm going to tell you what happened behind the scenes. And I can do that with receipts because I have everyone's DMs. And yes, that includes Brony Fandone's DMs with KP, which make for fairly fascinating reading. So, the allegations against Saber Spark were first released on Twitter through Brony Fandone's account. And believe it or not, that fact's going to become quite relevant later on. These allegations would come from an anonymous source, claiming that in 2012 and 2013, though it is worth noting that there would be a later correction that this all occurred in 2012, this individual met up with Saber Spark twice, and on both occasions, they engaged in non-consensual sexual activity with him. KP would then present these allegations in her video and follow it up with a conversation between herself and Courtney Pete regarding the nature of consent. As a quick note for those of you unaware of who Courtney Pete is, this is the sister of Lily Orchard, and most people will be aware of her through her ongoing campaign against Lily Orchard, who is alleged to have abused Courtney during her childhood. Regarding the allegations themselves, and we'll come to who the accuser actually is, I was immediately pretty skeptical of these when I saw them. I put out a Twitter thread outlining my issues with the allegations the day after they dropped, but I'd like to take a moment to be crystal clear at this point. I don't think anybody will ever be able to say with 100% certainty that these events did or did not occur. While Saber Spark has denied the accusations, this occurred so long ago that the evidence to condemn or vindicate him just doesn't exist. Which is exactly why accusations like this should never be platformed by a creator. Putting anyone in the position where they have to deal with life-ruining allegations when you have no evidence to support them beyond a single victim testimony is an incredibly callous and fucked up thing to do to somebody. And as we dive into the deeper drama surrounding this story, particularly when looking at people like Brony Fandone, that's a theme. Because when it comes to the Black Griffin allegations, vast amounts of the evidence supplied against him is incredibly shaky. And when challenged on this, the defense is the quantity of allegations, regardless of their quality. And to be candid, it astonishes me that this has gone on for as long as it has. That being said, let's get to the behind the scenes. One thing I was made immediately aware of is apparently Lyo Convoy was involved in this, which didn't come as much of a surprise given his history with this particular community. Lyo again has pre-existing relationships with KP and many of the other people involved in this particular fandom. Actually, little bit of fun lore for you, but a lot of the people involved in the Senate server actually originate in the Brony community, with individuals such as Queen Seraphina even voice acting in popular Brony cartoons like this one from Pymations. Though, to my surprise, Lyo's involvement in this is incredibly minimal. He would, though, share what DMs he had, and it seems he was added to a couple of different group chats, the first involving the individuals levelling accusations towards DA Games, as well as the individual making allegations against Saber Spark. In the interest of transparency, and because the DA Games group chat is less of interest right now, though is referenced in later conversations, I think it's useful to hear this first recording just in full so you can get a general scale of Lyo's level of involvement.
So, is everybody here like previous employees of DA Games? Is that what I'm getting reading the chat here? Okay, so is everybody here an adult or we got any minors here? I haven't heard the interview myself, but I'm curious. When you say unserious, is that because humor is a coping mechanism for you? Because that's pretty common. I think maybe putting in a section, perhaps, with a notation on studies, showing that sometimes people cope with things via humor, and that's how they figure out discussing it, would probably help to that, not just in the sense that it would recontextualize your interview, and obviously make it to where it doesn't need to be redone, but also it further points out that you're a victim of these things, and that's how you're internalizing it, and it puts more credibility to your claim than just redoing it and trying to do it in a sterile as possible fashion.
Of note here, Lyo's advice is to allow original victim testimonies to stand as they are. This is very, very solid advice for reasons that will become clear in a little bit. As for his conversation with the Saber Spark accuser, well, that requires a little bit of dissection. To begin with, when KP came to Lyo to ask his opinion on this, Lyo is incredibly clear that the correct course of action is to go to the police and file a report.
Then that needs to be handled by the cops, like, period. Like, 100% period. That needs a police report filed today.
Amazingly, he also points out the complete bloody obvious that the accuser trying to remain anonymous to protect themselves from Saber Spark finding out it's them makes no sense, because if this is true, Saber Spark will immediately know who is making the accusation.
Here's the problem, though, with that inherently. If that did happen, and Saber did do that, he will by nature know who it is. So if it gets out in any way, shape, or form, and a police report hasn't been filed, she's going to be at risk. Like, that's just the truth of the matter in this. And it's unpleasant, it's ugly, but that's the truth.
These sentiments from Lyo would broadly be reiterated to the accuser when he got in a conversation with her. Because whatever else you want to say about Lyo Convoy, and believe me, I understand, even he sees the inherent risks of running a story like this, noting that it may open KP up to a defamation suit. They'd continue to go back and forth on this topic for a while, with the accuser pushing back that filing a report may allow Saber to find out who she is, though the accuser does accept by the end that releasing this story at all means that Saber will be able to identify her, which makes this entire interaction, again, very, very bizarre. I'd also like to point out that this account, Sunspecs, was created specifically to have this conversation with Lyo, as the accuser further obfuscates their actual identity. And when Lyo refuses to budge that a police report is required, the accuser would essentially ghost him and refuse to communicate any further. So who is this mysterious accuser? Well, that would be a woman by the name of Emu Emmy. Now, how do I know that? Well, there were a few reasons. There was a large amount of circumstantial evidence that was compiled in a Google document a week or so ago. This spread like wildfire and led to her name being shared in multiple chats. We also have these vague posts from Casey, the partner of Saber Spark's editor. But I have to admit I was slightly ahead of the curve here, because before any of this was public, Emmy had provided a Dropbox link to a video as evidence that she had attended the cons in question. But Emmy is not some random unknown individual. She is a public figure, her name is public, and if you click on more information on this Dropbox video, it has her name on it. It is also worth me noting that at this point, now that Saber Spark's response is out, Emmy has been on the record with other content creators, talking at length about these accusations and herself. And yes, I was offered this recording. And the fact that such a large content creator, somebody who has literally been on Dr. Phil, would try to platform these accusations anonymously, is an element that deserves discussion and analysis. Lyo would also get me in contact with KP, which is why he is in the first call, and KP would provide confirmation that it was Emmy. I expect you're also wondering, when this information became available to KP herself. And I'll be honest with you, that was also something I was quite curious to know.
So, whatever.
Well,
and then,
when did you know?
when did I know it was Emmy?
Yes.
At the beginning.
Right, okay. Okay. So, from sort of an outside perspective, one of the big difficulties, I guess, with this story is you have a reasonably sized creator for this space coming out anonymously with a very long history with this group. I mean, they certainly interacted with Saber and everyone else in this, around the DA group for a long period of time. I am surprised you didn't look into anything about them or question the fact that they were coming out with this anonymously.
Well, the anonymous part seemed clear. She was afraid that she was going to get harassed, and with my interactions with Saber, and like other people's interactions with Saber, he'll try to kind of use his platform to I guess kind of shake people a little bit. That's what he tried to do with me, at least. Seemingly. I guess I didn't question that. So, like, I guess suffice to say I was fucking stupid, and, this is gonna be another long week. I don't really know what to tell you besides that.
Before we move forward, we should probably talk about who exactly Emmy is, as that may shed a little light on why they may wish to remain anonymous. Emmy Jones is best known, at least from a drama perspective, for engaging in an affair with Ryan Drummond, one of the Sonic voice actors, and she is generally deeply disliked by the Sonic fandom, despite the fact that, like any good fan would, she did apparently get him to do the voice. But if this was her only controversy, I don't think it would be relevant. However, Emmy has a long history of being an unreliable narrator, or at least being seen as such. I said earlier that she's been on Dr. Phil, and while this was just a rumour for a while, Emmy would come out in the comments section of that video confirming it was her at 16 on an episode talking about how she wanted to become a teen mother. Now, it is not unusual for a content creator who's been around this long to have their fair share of dramas, but Emmys have a particular flavour, and they come in two parts. Firstly, Ryan Drummond is not Emmy's only sex scandal. Now, obviously, there's the Dr. Phil episode, but she's also been accused of using her, shall we say, assets, to force other voice actors out of roles that she wants.
If she wants to get onto a project, she has to brute force her way in, and normally she does this by sleeping with whoever she can get her hands on. This is what ended up happening with Wrath of Nazo. Originally, the project starred Spirit of the Blue as Sonic, and his best friend Blue-Eyed Fox was voicing Tails. Emmy wanted in on this project because she had a thing for Spirit of the Blue, and she wasn't exactly happy that somebody else was voicing Tails, no less this person's best friend. So Emmy slept with Spirit of the Blue so she could replace Blue-Eyed Fox.
It is worth noting here that all of this does in some way come from biased sources, as we see the theme of much of this being based on testimony continue. But the second flavour of controversy Emmy is known for is sympathy baiting. While there is the standard "I'm being harassed" comment that you'll see from any run-of-the-mill creator, perhaps most damning here is accusations that Emmy on multiple occasions has scammed her audience through GoFundMe schemes, asking for money for a variety of ailments before mysteriously appearing at conventions or on holiday. In the interest of balance, I would like to challenge at least part of this, because when it comes to the claim that she used this money to attend conventions, that doesn't seem to be true, as when it comes to this period, she appears to have had a good working relationship with Sega, who would have covered her attendance. This is not to say whether I think Emmy is guilty or innocent of any of these accusations, but she does have an undeniable pattern when it comes to drama, which is damaging in this case because regardless of the validity of these claims against Saber Spark, they do fit within this motif. There are of course no perfect victims, and none of us should have those expectations, But in a case like this, where there is no evidence for the accusations being made, the credibility of the accuser is basically all I or anyone else has to go on. Now, when other people have looked into it, what they've found is a video called The Queen Falls by Lance Jerkov. And I'm gonna lay my cards on the table here. I have a bit of an issue with this video, and it feels a touch like a microcosm of this entire drama.
And that's alongside her reputation as a backstreet girl and a bad mother being so well known in this fandom that apparently people are just talking about it openly, with the final nail in the coffin being her association with Animated James and Toon Critic Y2K, two men who, let's just say, had a similar interest in women to Jared Fogle.
Because much of what is presented is a fragment of evidence, and then an awful lot of speculation. And this is true even of the Drummond stuff. Yes, they had an affair, but we have no idea what that actually looked like. And it's used to paint Emmy as a home-wrecking bitch who actively tried to destroy Drummond's marriage. The fandom then does exactly what you'd expect. They treat Drummond as though he has no agency and he is a victim of some insane ethos. Later on in the video, Lance would also present testimony from Steven Sayers, a now police officer but former employee of Sierra Games. But Emmy denies even knowing this person, and if it is true, the implications are incredibly fucked up, because the dates that Sayers originally gives would mean that Emmy was a minor at the time. When Sayers is confronted on this fact, he quickly shifts position to saying it must have occurred in 2013, but that makes little sense with the overall timeline of Emmy's career. Irregardless, I don't know why we're taking the testimony of a guy who, while trying to shit on this chick, managed to make himself look like a nonce. Now, none of this should be treated as though I'm trying to mount some kind of defense of Emmy. I've got my own opinions on the allegations, but she won't talk to me. I have tried reaching out to have a conversation. She's simply not interested. Rather, what I'm trying to show you is that this community regularly works off half-truths and rumours. And that's pretty problematic when we're talking about very serious allegations. Even this video from Lance, great example. Because I was asking the question as to why somebody would drop a video like this when they've got a fairly consistent upload schedule and then seemingly vanish from their channel and not upload for a year. And when I went looking for that answer, multiple people would tell me that Lance had allegations against him. No one provided any evidence for this, but if anything, that's exactly what I'd expect. This has obviously become so normalized for this community. And so now, as we move into how these allegations were handled, it begins to make a lot more sense why nobody questioned these allegations against Saber Spark before platforming them. Somewhat depressingly, and ironically, one of the few examples I can find of anyone doing any due diligence is actually from KP back in March, when they were talking to Brony Fandone about another victim who'd been handed off to them, and had turned tail and run the minute they were asked difficult questions. And KP even states, yeah, figured I would check, cause God forbid we are wrong. A sentiment which would have been useful to keep in mind when the next day rolled around and she was presented with Emmy's victim story. Emmy would be funneled towards KP through Bonk and Amy. For those wondering who Amy is, the most information I could get is that they are somebody's wife. That's literally it. But apparently they'd known about this since 2015 allegedly. KP would then work with Emmy to get the statement prepared for release. Now, as a clarifier here, there was some editing of this statement, but as I can see it being sent by Brony Fandone, I can confirm that the bulk of Emmy's statement was not guided or influenced by KP. Nevertheless, I was interested to know how much input she had had, and when I set Jenny to work on a little bit of digging, she found the Google Doc that KP had originally put out. Now, because nobody knows how to protect Google documents apparently, Jenny was able to retrieve the edit history, which includes notes from KP intended to guide Emmy in improving the statement. This level of involvement is not apparent in KP's video, She does not make it clear that she has been working closely with the victim before the release of this statement. This allows her in the video to look like an impartial observer, just reporting on these allegations, which is not the case. But once again, I think it is best that you just hear this all from KP. So there was a Google Doc that was posted that you did and put up with her basically her full statement. The one that was also posted on Twitter in screenshots.
Oh, okay.
So
I guess I forgot I did that, but yes.
How much influence did you have on that statement?
I already discussed this with Enter and Lazy. I just gave critique. I gave screenshots. Here, I'll get the screenshots of me giving critique to it. Well, I get them. That's my answer. And Courtney gave feedback as well.
Okay. When you say critique, what are we talking about here?
Flow of things. That's like basic English stuff. Like nothing really. She wrote most of it herself. And I was like, let me put this into paragraphs and give feedback on like the grammar and the general flow of it. That was really it.
Okay, I'm just having a quick read of this. So generally speaking, you were in conversations with Emmy, and you were working on the flow of this statement to present something to the public. I mean, I suppose my core question is, why didn't you provide an interview call with Emmy if you kind of had access to that?
She was afraid. I mean, I even asked her if she wanted to verbally read her own testimony in the video, but she was afraid that people could recognize her, because she's a voice actor, her voice. And then I said, well, what if we pitch it down? She says, no, I think people would still be able to recognize it just based on how I speak. And I was like, okay. So.
Okay. You understand that kind of where the way this looks from your video is you have a victim statement that looks far more distant from you than is the reality. And then you have a long conversation with Courtney where you are essentially providing context to how you are seeing this almost at a distance, which is, I would say, fairly misleading to an audience.
Yeah, the idea with that is I'm just not familiar with essay in general. I believe that you are familiar with Courtney's history. She was someone I trusted, so I just felt like it would be helpful in a call to talk about it from someone's an SI's survivor's perspective. So that was kind of the intention.
Okay, so I mean, there is another element to this. In that Google document, you are providing editing notes at points where you're saying that here's where you should mention this was non-consensual, in both those instances.
Yeah, that was I just wanted to make a note to make that clear because that's what she said to me. So I
mean, I'll be honest, what it looks like is that you had somebody come to you with a victim story and then you tailored their victim impact statement, which is quite bad. But I've seen little bits of kind of the conversations through Lio, where there's a question with one of the other members of the DA group where it's like, well, should we re-record the interview? And Lio says, well, no, let the interview stand as is. You can provide context afterwards, but the interview should stand as your interview. When you've got something like this, the way it looks to me is you've got, okay, well, this is the statement from the victim. I know that I'm going to use this in a video. How do I make this, what are the points that I need to hit with an audience? Which is, not great.
I mean, so was the general critique, I just let them talk and I didn't, ask them, I'm not really following.
So the general critique is this. You let them talk, and then you took their statement and tailored it to be more impactful for content that you were planning to release. And at the same time, I've got statements from Brony Fandone that you also provided statements to the other DA victims, which was sort of a line to take.
I don't remember. Can you put that screenshot in there? I don't really remember that.
Yeah, give me 1 second. It would have been this one.
Oh, I mean, I just wrote that to be helpful, so he didn't have to do it. And my intention was essentially like, hey, I wrote a thing, change it however you feel fit. So that was, and I guess he thought that I was trying to put words into his mouth. And I just so things that I assumed were, he had talked to the victim extensively. He didn't, and I didn't know that. So, I guess I was the only one that talked to her extensively. Besides Amy, he's one of my people, one of the people I need to kind of talk to, but I'm also afraid he's gonna screenshot me out of context again, and that's scary as well. So
yeah, I understand that. I mean, it's partly, what I run up against is when I see stuff like this, and what you said, putting words in people's mouths. The problem is what I've got to go on is kind of like what I can pick through and see, which timeline-wise is there are multiple documents being written, including the large DA document, which had way more victim impact statements, many of which have been pulled entirely. I believe one of them is Jamesy.
Jamie also got a cease and desist, so that scared him.
Right.
Pull out entirely.
So what I've got in front of me is multiple documents in which there have been many chefs involved in these particular kitchens. And it feels very guided, which is concerning when we're talking about hit pieces, because then, how much is influenced not just by the people who may have gone through these things, but by people who are looking to then utilize them. Because Brony Fandone has been going after Black Griffin in this group for years now.
Just to be clear, I had nothing to do with the DA Games document. Those were written way before I got involved, just to clarify.
Okay. Can you just explain some of these edits in this document then? What does the highlighted in purple mean?
I don't remember.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So yeah, it's a placement of things of bring up the fact that he did not ask for consent here.
Yeah, well, I just gave screenshots that gave more context to that. So I guess it was Courtney's note, because Courtney also gave some feedback on the statement, and
Okay. I mean,
not to blame her. No, she
yeah, no,
like
sure. I mean, again, I get this is a collaborative process, and Courtney's not here to sort of give her side of what happened, so I don't want to start just blaming people who aren't around. I suppose at a core level, what and this is why people are focusing on the Saber Spark stuff. What you have is testimony of something that happened over a decade ago, from one person who chose to remain anonymous, who has a long internet history, which is mixed. Again, like, I'm sure that there are two sides to the Emmy story. In fact, a few people are quite interested in the other side of that Emmy story. I've already heard from them.
I'm gonna attempt to get it because she seems to. I mean, obviously, don't release these screenshots publicly. At least not now without asking. But she seems to trust me right now. So, for lack of a better word, I'm pretty fucking pissed, and I feel like a dupe that was put on for a ride. But my implication with everything so Bonk came to me with this story because he was having mental health problems at the time and he didn't have the energy to deal with it. So my understanding, feel free to ask him, this was going to come out regardless of me. So I was just there already making a video about it, so it just seemed
right,
like
but yeah, sure. But this stuff had been building for a while on some of the DA stuff. I can see that from the documents. But this stuff with Emmy seems to have come right out of the blue, right where you needed it, and you seem to not have questioned, shall we say, the good fortune of that happening. You seem to have just gone, oh great, cool, well now I've got something to go at Saber with.
Well, let me clarify. So I would imagine you can ask Amy about this. I don't know how long maybe she said 2023, I think. But she has known about this for a couple of years. Amy is Peter New's wife, who I mean, don't tell her I sent you because she doesn't like me right now. But she was the one I originally talked to get in contact with.
Is that
Emmy.
is that the other Pegasus sister or whatever the hell?
No,
okay.
I don't think Amy has a presence in the fandom.
Okay, because I'm just like, even for me, I'm just trying to make sense of who half these people are. Now, it might be slightly hypocritical for me, of all people, to criticize someone else for becoming too involved in a story. But there are lines to this, and getting a victim to edit their impact statement is certainly a line. While KP argues this is to clarify and fill in gaps, these edits read far more as trying to remove any semblance of doubt and emphasize things like the power imbalance. Making sure a victim's impact statement fits more easily with the arguments you're going to make in your video is certainly highly unethical. Within the DM logs between KP and Emmy, KP provides feedback from Courtney Pete. One particular line of interest is, and it sort of kills me that she might be giving any sort of grace to him at the expense of herself, because he considered it implied. And this isn't just a throwaway line, it's intermingled amongst a tirade on how consent works, emphasizing why that line in particular is an issue. It would work, too. Emmy does change her statement because of this feedback. Hey, sorry, I removed the part giving him grace by saying I understand he may have thought consent was implied. Courtney is definitely right. I just know his retort is going to be him believing consent was there. Courtney is right though, it was never implied, even if I did like him at the time. This is direct evidence that KP and Courtney worked to tailor the victim's statement to make it more damaging. And the reason this is an issue is because it's not how Emmy necessarily sees the situation. It is KP and Courtney trying to influence Emmy to perceive the situation through their lens. If you care about what victims have to say, and this story is full of people who don't care what victims have to say, you should respect those original statements. But as if to perfectly encapsulate my point of how fucking careless everyone here is, I went to check the release statement, and that section about implied consent is still present. I thought I was losing my mind for a second because I've read these DMs, so I went back to check, and I'm right. I'm showing you the original statement supplied by Emmy to KP, and I've highlighted the word implied. But if we scroll all the way down to her updated statement, and I cannot fucking believe this, it's gone. Emmy did make this edit, but KP is paying so little attention, she didn't even include it in the final document for release. No wonder those involved in this didn't care about the fact that Emmy has no evidence for the allegations she's making. They don't even care about her actual testimony. And don't worry, because this situation somehow becomes more absurd. Because you'll remember, Lyo advised KP that this was a matter for the authorities, and they would require at the very least a police statement to be filed if they were planning to run this story. One of the things that got sort of mentioned was Lyo's involvement, and I was interested in how far that involvement kind of went. I mean, maybe you can speak to that. It doesn't seem like Lyo is, from what I have seen, that involved. He doesn't seem to have seen the video before it came out. I think Lyo said to me when asked about this particular statement and this victim, his advice was, don't run this. That seems to have been his involvement. And go to the police about stuff. Is that unfair?
I don't remember the don't run this, but yeah, we did have an extensive conversation where we recommended that she go to the police and get a police report first. And she didn't want to.
The don't run this was when I told you shouldn't put this in a video.
Okay.
Because a police report wasn't filed. That's what he's referring to.
Okay, well that's why we released it on Twitter first to kind of have it
Well, I don't know if that helps, because that, if anything, makes it worse, KP, because it looks like you've gone, oh, we don't have a police report, but if this is gaining traction on Twitter, then I can put it in a video you are already making with a victim you are already speaking to.
I don't really have a response to that.
Okay. It's like, so what I'm running up against here is there are going to be multiple sort of views on this video, from everything from stupidity to malice. I don't know where I sit with that at the moment, I'll be honest, because, you know, I know you by your own admission do not like this group of people. You have a history with them. You were handed stuff that was you couldn't substantiate from years ago, and you know, you use that to make essentially rape by coercion argument against somebody without even speaking to Saber about it. I mean, it's pretty fucking wild, frankly.
No, I get it. No, I was just stupid and I wanted to. She came to me. She, like, Bonk already knew I was making this video. It just seemed like another victim testimony to add, like the DA Games one.
Unsurprisingly, when we're dealing with a community that just repeats things they've heard over and over again until they somehow become true, even when it is, once again, life-ruining accusations, KP and others, and we're about to get to those people, worked on the assumption that once this was out on Twitter, coverage of it was fair game. But to be clear, in the DMs, KP is scheduling this with Brony Fandone, and the statement itself even goes out early and has to be removed. Despite how fucked up all of this is, the level of incompetence is unironically just fucking hilarious. Predictably, once the video had been released and the backlash was in, these little rats started fleeing the sinking ship. Fandone's DMs here are pretty interesting. but we'll get to his section in a little bit. However, one thing I want to point out is this tweet from May 5th, where Fandome says, "I talked with her in call about the problems. She told me she was surprised by the reactions because her team and the victim viewed it prior and liked it. I did not realize at the time that she was lying." Well, I can prove that in this case at least, KP wasn't, because Emmy did see the video and had a positive reaction to it. Before we move forward though, I do think it is valuable that you hear something that isn't just my opinion or KP's own statements. And one person who's known this group of people for a significant period of time is Henry, Saber Spark's editor. Let's talk about KP and your experiences with her.
Sure.
How did you first get to meet KP?
Through the convention scene. So going to different conventions, basically she would either be a panelist or a guest. She would show up to these cons, and even back in the early days, it was kind of, everyone was trying to be friends together and establish relationships, but you would find that there were some people that just, you weren't necessarily vibing with, or that they weren't on the same wavelength. So KP was one of those individuals early on to me that I just got a sense of entitlement and a sense of, her demeanor was very off-putting. So a lot of people kind of created this, mindset, like, don't necessarily include KP if she's trying to wedge her way into panels and or, scenes on these convention floors and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I have firsthand experience of times where I've had to kind of, create that wall for her to just say, like, don't try to, come into our space because, you have this sense that, like, nepotism, or not nepotism, what is it? Narcissism? Yeah, like narcissism is strong with her.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Can you give me some examples of some experiences you guys have just had with KP over the years? Because I know, Saber mentioned their relationship in the response, and I think it would be helpful for people to get that picture.
Yeah. So, a first-hand experience would be so at Equestria LA 2017, we had a bad fanfic reading panel. KP showed up. She was sitting in the front row, kind of heckling us the whole time, saying, "Hey, let me go up on stage." Just trying to kind of wedge her way into this thing where we had to, get prior approval to get this panel approved. We had the people who are panelists on that panel. She has done this many times where it's kind of, she thinks she knows best or that she should be included and tries to wedge her way in. Other experiences that, I wasn't necessarily firsthand for. She was at Cider Fest and a artist named Jen Blake had a booth in the vendor hall. KP, trying to talk to Jen, positions herself kind of behind the vendor table, and as Jen is taking on commissions and interacting with guests who are there for her, KP wedges herself in and says, "Oh, I'd be willing to take some commissions, if you guys want from me," and kind of almost like trying to funnel business away from the actual comic artist that works on IDW's MLP comics. And I could tell that Jen was very uncomfortable about the whole situation and kind of made it clear that KP was not welcome to be there anymore, because she just didn't have like this concept of what she was doing was wrong, and she has many instances of that. I mean, I can even point to another one where it's more of a private thing, so it's not necessarily something where I'm going to say I had firsthand experience, but I heard the story. So she moved to California, and who was it? Rachel Bloom was having a show within LA, and she's a well-known individual, kind of has a awards and history, and I can see the appeal of wanting to go to, say, like a Rachel Bloom show. She's a fan. The problem is that KP kept telling people that she had an in or like some sort of connection to talk to Rachel Bloom, and she really wanted to go to the show to kind of hand over her portfolio and see if they could work together on stuff. Well, she lied about that. She never actually had like a connection with Rachel Bloom. She just knew that the show was going to happen, and she was going to kind of more or less spring it on her at the end and just like wait outside the stage door to give her things. But when people, asked her, hey, how do you have a connection with this? Like, how did you, broker this deal? She's lying the whole time saying, oh, well, I have a way to, get to her and talk to her about this stuff. And I just want to see if she wants to work on this project, a video project. And yeah, it's example after example. Casey and I, well, mainly Casey, tried really hard when she first moved to LA to be a mentor for her. I had already had my prior experience with her, so I had written her off kind of as, I'll believe it when I see it, like her attitude change and her demeanor change. But when she moved to LA, she was very much in the mindset of, hey, I want to kind of like, start over. I want to, be better. So Casey offered to be her mentor and pointed out many times where it was like, hey, you can't kind of act this way towards people. You need to also be mindful that, if people don't want to be friends with you, you don't have that right to say, you need to be friends with me. The narcissism part, rearing its head. I would just say that KP, had many examples of another individual who she had beef with was AC Race Best. He basically said, I don't want to be friends with you, long time ago. I think Casey, suggested that KP reach out and try to get to the bottom of why they never could be friends. He gave her a detailed response as to why, his reasons, and she lashed out. She basically started cursing him out, sending him a long message. I'm sure there is a chat log out there that could actually be presented for that. But it goes to show that she definitely has had both a beef with Steven and other individuals who haven't kind of, in her mind, lifted her up with them. They became successful and she saw it as, why not me? Her content in the community as a whole was kind of lackluster, or it got views, but as soon as, she kind of wanted to shift away from that, she couldn't pivot in a way where her content was thriving. So I think she very much internalized a lot of this. Like, why is it that Steven was able to do that with Saber Spark? Why is it that other individuals are able to make their livelihood, work for them? So yeah, those are just some of the examples.
Firstly, you wanted to add a correction for Henry for the Race Best story.
Oh yeah. I never advised Rachel to contact Jeffrey at all. I talked to her after she had lashed out, and I was not happy with her, and I told her as much. This is all very just disappointing and sad for me personally. So I'm sorry if I sigh quite a bit. I pointed out that they have very little in common other than liking one TV show in the whole world. And what is her deal with wanting to be friends with this one guy? And she didn't have a very good answer for me. She struggled with that. She literally stammered to the point where I don't actually remember what she said. It wasn't very substantial. But no, I did not tell her to reach out to Jeff. He told me that she lashed out, and you could probably tell the story of how frustrated I was with her because I went to bat for Rachel. And I had told people that moving to LA had caused her to grow and mature as a person. It is difficult. The entertainment industry is difficult. Let's be real. And she was trying, and I thought maybe it would have given her some life perspective that she had lacked before. And then she went and made me out to be a liar, and I was super not happy with her about that.
I mean, is it fair to say that this is the end of any industry contact she had left? That essentially it's destroyed any remaining friendship she had?
That's... As far as my sphere, that's pretty accurate. I know that people that I know that if I say something, I mean it. And I did tell everyone. I posted the link to my Twitter and I said, this is my stance. I just want all of you to know. And I already knew that a lot of our mutuals had put her on the information diet. So... did this do it? I don't think so. She had already dug the grave. This is just the last pile of dirt. As far as industry contacts, what did she have?
Before we move forward, I want to add a little disclaimer here, because we're going to talk about the other people who were involved in this. And I don't want this to come across as some sort of exoneration of KP and Courtney. It's just that there are other people involved with blood on their hands. Since the video came out, a lot of people have been trying to use them as scapegoats, understandably. But realistically speaking, many of these people should not be feeling particularly smug right now. There are obviously levels of blame to go around, but one particular group, and where we're going to start, is people who have also run allegations fed to them by Brony Fandone. Because realistically, they've done exactly the same thing as KP did, they've just been lucky about it. And this little group can be perfectly encapsulated through one particular YouTuber, Lazy Bedhead. The reason we're starting here of all places is because on levels of culpability, just believing a document that's handed to you is something that, generally speaking, a lot of YouTubers do, trusting that the vetting has already been done for them. In fact, this is KP's defense for why she fucked this up. She believed that Brony Fandone and Amy had already vetted Emily. Now, is this incredibly dumb? Of course it is. But my annoyance comes from the fact that it's shockingly common in this story.
Pinky and would ask Pinky if she liked a picture of his penis. Destiny would straight up delete the Twitter account associated with this interaction and wouldn't rediscover Black Griffin until years later, when he voiced Alistair in the Has-Been Hotel pilot. Destiny also addressed the creators of Billy Bust Up, which we can discuss later. Now, since this was when Destiny was 13 years old, hindsight is 2020, so none of the chats or this dick pic was ever documented or screenshots taken. So, for now, these are just allegations from memory. Although, I do think this testimony coming forward does sort of confirm the sneaking suspicion that people have had about Gabe for years up until this point. Sourced from Courtney Pete's own video, she interviews two individuals who have been a part of the Brony community and convention spaces for years. Even they have testified that con staff and community members had speculated of Gabriel's grooming relationship with Claire for decades.
Now this requires us to talk a little bit about the Black Griffin allegations. I don't want to go too deep here because it is a hell of a rabbit hole, so we're going to focus on the Destiny allegations in particular. To give you a TLDR, Destiny claims that in 2012 she interacted with Gabe, and during those interactions, while she was a minor, Gabe would flirt with her and also offered her a dick pic. Much like the allegations against Saber Spark, there is no evidence for this. And even in the document, it is noted that it can't have been in 2012 because Twitter didn't even add the function to send pictures in DMs until December of 2013. And yet Lazy Bedhead uses the fact the allegations even exist in the first place to try and label Black Griffin a predator. And I'd like you to keep in mind here that Fandom themselves admits that they don't have proof behind the Destiny allegations. In fact, they were using those allegations in an attempt to gay up and blackmail Black Griffin. When that didn't work, they released them anyway. And yes, I can already hear the scratching in my comments section. But Beckett, Black Griffin is a well-documented groomer. I'm not saying that Black Griffin isn't a groomer. I don't know. Certainly some of his interactions are pretty fucking weird, particularly the DeviantArt posts. But when we look through allegations like this, you need to have some kind of smoking gun. I showed you screenshots earlier of Grizzly the medic. In that instance, you have Grizzly, a security guard at BronyCon who tried to get a 12-year-old to come up to their hotel room, in DMs, acknowledging someone's age and continuing to have explicit conversations with them in their DMs. While Gabe is weird, very, very weird, this has apparently been going on for a decade and no one has a smoking gun. And to be clear, this isn't just internet stuff. Projects that Black Griffin and his wife have worked on are targeted. There is a massive public campaign to have this guy removed from any project that associates with him. All of which is based on the schizophrenic ramblings of Fandom. Now originally, this section was much longer and way more pissed off. I actually included Anthony Grimoglia giving a defense of Lazy Bedhead just to provide some kind of balance. but I have since spoken to her at length both about the Saber Spark allegations and the wider story involving Black Griffin, and as much of this section was directed pointedly towards her, that feels a little bit redundant at this point. However, just because I've spoken to Lazy doesn't mean I don't have massive criticisms for this video, so I just want to run over them in a slightly calmer, more chilled out tone. One of my major issues, in fact probably my main issue with this story, is the fact that nobody really vetted or checked anybody before running things. For example, Courtney Pete and by extension Lazy Bedhead used Sophie Scruggs as an expert on this community, but Scruggs is not a passive observer. We'll get to her section later, but all you need to know for the moment is Brony Fandone is not just one person. Sophie Scruggs has access to that account and has regularly posted from it. The reason this is all missed is because the information Lazy Bedhead has on Brony Fandone largely comes from the Gabe defense documents. While Lazy Bedhead, to her credit, does condemn this information because Fandone is a complete freak, she does post this updated pinned comment, stating that Fandone has largely moved on from these opinions they held when they were a minor. Lazy would explain to me that she posted and pinned this comment due to the fact she was getting pushback from Fandone defenders, and she largely just wanted them to shut the fuck up. But to be clear, Fandone has continued to defend his consumption of pornography depicting underage furry characters. In March of this year, Fandome would post an incredibly long schizo thread about their history with the community, at the end of which he includes these comments. If no one is hurt, then it isn't an issue. I can't hurt Noelle, and it doesn't represent me, or how I am with minors. If anything, it stems from my own situation when I was a minor. Psychology is complicated. I know what's in my brain. I know I have no attraction to children or animals. Noelle is neither to me in my head. An issue here is simply that Lazy doesn't use Twitter, and therefore never caught this. This lack of vetting isn't just me bitching about standards, it has quite serious implications for these wider stories. Fandone, whether you like it or not, is at the center of these allegations. His documents are the main sources of them, and when it comes to Saber Spark, he has been pushing to find something on Saber Spark, once again, for years. If the allegations against Black Griffin are true, Fandone's involvement is a major disservice to any victims involved. Because now, all that is really required to deflect these allegations is to point to the crazy motherfucker who's been the driving force behind them. Some people might say that this position is dismissive, but you have to keep in mind, in a story like this, where there is no evidence for anything, your currency is credibility. The vast bulk of the evidence, quote-unquote, against these people is bollocks. It simply doesn't hold up to any reasonable level of scrutiny. All of this is made worse by the fact that you're not asking me or anybody else to trust the victims. You're asking us to trust people like Courtney Pete, KP, Brony Fandone, and Sophie Scruggs, all of whom exist on a spectrum somewhere between incredibly fucking stupid and deeply malicious. In the conclusion of her video, Lazy Bedhead says that she doesn't actually like making videos like this, part of the reason being that creators are waiting for the next big expose for views and clicks and likes. And despite everything, I do kind of believe her. I don't view Lazy as actually malicious, and part of the reason for that is Anthony, because as he points out the nuances, I realised what really annoyed me about this video is the fact that she takes the Destiny allegations and the allegations from another unnamed 13-year-old claiming that Gabe also offered to send her a dick pic, again with no evidence for this, and treats them as gospel. She says that this is evidence that Gabe is a groomer, this shows us who he is. I don't think she'd be dumb enough to do that unless she genuinely believed that to be the case. So for all my criticisms of this video, again, I don't think she's just maliciously going after these people. However, that question of malice is a very interesting one. And while many people, I think fairly, believe that KP's primary motivation comes from her petty grudges that she's been clinging onto for over a decade, this feels like a nice segue onto the other group of people, who seem to have realised that KP is so blinded by her own insane biases that she presented the perfect vector to litigate their own petty grievances. Let's talk about this elusive Amy New. When I first introduced her to you, I said she was just somebody's wife, and while that sounds flippant, it's actually a very good description. Because Amy's claim to fame is being married to Peter New, the voice of Big Macintosh. For those of you who have no idea who or what that is, I deeply envy you, but he's basically a main secondary character from MLP. So if you're wondering why Amy scuttled away so quickly, it's probably because being involved in leveling unsubstantiated rape allegations against somebody might not be the best look publicly. But Amy has known and been involved with this group of people for over a decade. And while I'm not quite clear on the mechanics of how this worked, she was certainly one of the people handing over Emily to KP for this expose. Now, I didn't reach out to Amy personally, but Angry Slug did, and I was quite interested in what she had to say, so I asked Slug for a copy of those DMs. Now, there's nothing in here that's particularly interesting, but it does confirm her involvement, and the fact that she is very much trying to push the blame onto KP. And from the DMs with Fandom, it seems very clear that they were also very much in contact. You'll also see later that Amy and Sophie Scruggs seem to have a pretty good relationship, so the idea that she was just a passive bystander concerned for her friend is absurd. As a final late addition, right before publication, I was made aware of one other bit of correspondence with Amy, because Mr. Enter would also reach out to Amy, and she'd give the statement that she found out about this on the 25th of March, which would mean, timeline-wise, Amy was told about this, immediately gave the information to Fandom, who immediately passed it on to KP. Now this is all a little bit weird for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Amy would come out in support of the statement from Emmy on Twitter, saying that they've been friends for over a decade, and that she was at Canterlot Gardens confirming that she had seen Emmy and Saber Spark together. The statement of, "I have nothing to gain from this, I just want my friend to be believed," is also complete insanity considering Amy's wider involvement in this. Once again, to say nothing of the validity of Emily's accusations, Amy presents herself like she's not involved and knew nothing about this before publication. Or, alternatively, this could also be read as though it was a rumour that had been going around for years that was finally being outed. And I'm sure some version of the truth exists within all this obfuscation, but these people are just so fucking manipulative. One thing about this story which I find pretty amusing, though overall quite frustrating, is that the side that's so concerned about transparency have all refused to speak to anyone the minute things got difficult for them. Now this presents a bit of a problem. I don't know people like Amy. All I've got to go on is fragments of information. But to be clear, just because they won't speak to me doesn't mean nobody did. And thanks to the excellent work of OppBlock, after his response video, I was put in touch with Saber Spark. Now that conversation I had with Saber Spark is unfortunately off the record. He doesn't feel comfortable at the moment coming out and making random public statements, and I'll be honest, I do respect that decision. However, I still need to know about these people, and from the other side, I accept the criticism of it would be nice to hear from people. So please, allow me to solve that problem for you, because I sat down to have a conversation with the voice actress of Sweetie Belle from My Little Pony, the wife of Black Griffin, Claire. Let's go in levels. Can we start with Amy New?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell me about Amy New and why why the wife of the voice actor for Big Macintosh is somehow involved in attacking your sort of, I guess, circle?
All right. I will tell you all the things that I know about her. I know. I'm like, I don't know. I'm hesitant to say things, but at the same time, I feel like I've been so polite and nice for so long that I think I don't feel like being polite and nice anymore. So there's my grain of salt before I say what I'm gonna say. I don't know where the switch was with Amy. I don't know if my own father has talked to either of them. But I do know that my dad has reached out to people that I've worked with and warned them about me when I had told my parents that, I was in a relationship with Gabe. And this is when I was almost 20. I don't know when the swap or switch was for Amy. I had met her a few times before. I knew she was married to Peter New. I think I can't remember a whole lot about her. But I don't know. I don't know. She's like kind of mixed up in the fan world, and she came first as a fan. To my knowledge, she was a fan first, and then she just kind of started dating Peter, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And she was kind of like a fan of My Little Pony and a fan of Peter, and then started dating. And I was like, oh, okay. And, I didn't really think much of it at the time. I didn't really care. As an adult looking back on that situation, I also know that I'm pretty sure that Amy has, like, publicly stated before at some point that she was just, like, really concerned for me because she had kind of alluded to, I was a grooming victim and I didn't know, and I was smart and I was, in love and I knew what that was like, and I just feel really bad for her. And I'm like, why do people freaking keep saying this about me? Like I'm some idiot that, and this is the thing too, like, even if I get frustrated about it, people are like, oh, I understand that you're so angry. Like, you're a very, like, it doesn't mean that you're stupid. You can be a smart person and get in a situation like that. I'm like, yeah. And I freaking know what that's like because that was my family's situation. And I hate it when people say that to me as if I don't know what that's like. And one day I'll figure it out. One day I'll figure out that I've been groomed. And I'm sitting here like, nobody knows that I've basically already been through this. People talk about grooming in this non-sexual way, which is so funny because I'm like, why the frick would I be groomed non-sexually into a marriage? What's the marriage for? Shaking hands? Like, what the hell? It just doesn't make any sense. But I hesitate to use the word groomed just because I hate it so much at this point. But I have had a lot of conditioning for other things in my life that once I became 18 and realized and gave myself some authority in my own life, I'm not going to do this just because this person says so. Just because this person is in my family and is telling me blah, 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 doesn't mean that I have to do that anymore. And so, anyway, to make a long story short, there are... I think it's really funny that Amy is somebody who is saying this kind of stuff. She wouldn't know. Started off very, I feel bad for her vibes. And then immediately went to, I'm blocking you. You're a danger. And I'm paraphrasing here, but that is the vibe that is being directed towards me now. And I think that's also really funny considering Peter New is somebody who has said inappropriate things about girls who are underage. And that is just laughable to me. And I feel like every single person who is the most loudly outspoken people about this situation are people who've got their own weird freaking skeletons. And I just sit here and I'm like, surely people can't believe this. Surely people have a brain, but apparently not, because now we're in the situation that we're in now. And it boggles my mind, and it just makes me roll my eyes, quite frankly.
Talking with Claire was pretty illuminating. I can almost understand why no one's been interested in hearing her side in all this. Because it must be pretty bloody difficult to run a story about somebody being a groomer when their primary victim, quote-unquote, won't go along with your narrative. But when you start picking apart the eccentricities of these relationships, it becomes a hell of a lot harder to treat the people leveling these accusations as just passive observers concerned for victims. No wonder so many people want to remain anonymous. They're not just random people from the internet, they're people with large public profiles in the community. I was astonished to find that people had either outright ignored Claire's public statements on the situation or actively attacked her as somehow complicit. This is also the case for Michelle, who played Applebloom on the show, whose long-term friendship with Gabe is the origin point of these rumours. And once again, because I can hear that scratching, I don't know the truth behind the Black Griffin allegations, and neither do you. But when I said earlier that many people do not care about victims in this story, this is what I mean. Because, hypothetically, let's say this mob is correct about Black Griffin. That would mean his two primary victims, quote-unquote, have been relentlessly attacked alongside him, and the reason for this is obvious. The people levelling these accusations don't care about victims. Their motivations are entirely self-interested. Which brings us rather nicely to Sophie Scruggs. Because, as I mentioned before, Brony Fandom isn't a one-man band. The other half of this little duo has seemingly been pushing these allegations longer than Bonk has. And in her case, it's almost more bizarre because she's not a random member of this community. She was an official artist for the My Little Pony comics.
My name is Sophie Scruggs. That's SOPHIEASCRUGGS if you want to look me up on Twitter, Sophie A. Scruggs.
I do know that she kind of spearheaded a lot of the allegations towards Gabe, and worked with, Brony Fandone, whatever, to kind of, create this wall of saying like we're the ones holding, this together, this case, and trying to bring the information to the light. And, she's trying to say like, we need to do this. It's like a crusade. It's even in her banner or her title for her Twitter, like, I believe Destiny. She's very much involved, even though she likes to have this idea that she's like, I'm not involved,
My opinion,
insane.
me speaking on that, is I think it's pretty messed up of Sophie to let a mentally ill person take the fall for her crusade.
Sophie has been obsessed with the Black Griffin story for so long, it is actually difficult to find an origin point of how this all began, but I have heard a couple of theories. The first is some nondescript traumatic event.
They also straight up use Sophie's trauma and mental illness to discredit them. Sophie seems to be suffering a lot from her own trauma, which must be incredibly tough to deal with, but she often spreads misinformation, even if unintentional.
And far from how this is being painted by Lazy, this is Sophie's own explanation for her behaviour. However, if it helps, I actually don't believe this is true. I think the explanation is far more simple. Sophie was massively jealous of Gabe. And again, that seems to be shockingly common. Black Griffin moved from being a fan of the show to working on it. And this crops up again and again.
A former con chair told me that the reason why Gabe was always at stuff as a special guest is if you wanted to invite for Applebloom, Monique would basically require to also invite Gabe. They would quote unquote throw him in for free.
See what I mean? Like,
and
the mother keeps pushing the two of them together. Why?
Yeah, and so it basically, like, they would, in order to have her, for example, if you wanted all of the Cutie Mark Crusaders, you have to have Gabe, basically. And that's kind of how he ingratiated himself into the guest of honor spot, even though he didn't really do a whole lot to earn a guest of honor spot. He did some background vocals on a few episodes, and that's it.
And to clarify too, so how it worked in the pony convention scene, I guess, if you want to call it, is there are the guests of honor who were specifically show staff. So like, voice actors, directors, et cetera, and then there'd be people like me and Sophie and people that were just active in the fandom space that were called community guests. And Gabe was usually the only exception to that for whatever reason, and that was the reason.
Clips like this are mind-bending. You literally start the conversation by explaining how he moved to doing background vocals on the show, therefore meeting the criteria of guest of honor, and then lament that he didn't really earn it. And these fucking people are still bitching about this in current day. When MomoCon heard about KP making the DA Games video, they removed her from the guest list. KP would then cry about this to Bonk, asking him whether he could get people to vouch for her so she could get back in. And isn't it interesting that all these stories are unattributable to random former con-chairs? It's all, somebody told me, or I heard this once. But realistically, that's all it ever can be, because people like Sophie and KP weren't really on the inside of any of these groups. KP basically survived off the kindness of Henry's now wife Casey, and while Sophie was seemingly an official comic artist, that's much less impressive than it sounds. Sophie was basically treated like any other vendor at any of these conventions. And that seething resentment for that core circle that actually had some relevance to this community means that Sophie's interest was not just Black Griffin. She was fully aware of the allegations against Saber Spark and what was going on behind the scenes. KP presented me a TSV file for their conversations. This is also the format KP used to provide me her conversations with Casey. And Casey has at least confirmed those logs are accurate. However, I note this here because whenever you're presented with something that could have been edited before it reached you, you should accept that possibility. Before we move on from Sophie, I want to just highlight one section in Lazy's video.
But also claiming that they associate with people who defend drawn child sexual abuse material?
Because that accusation of association is not random. And I want you to keep in mind the name Wootmaster for when we get to Fandom. But before that, I mean, I think that moves us on to sort of Sophie Scruggs and Fandom. But why don't we start with Scruggs, because I'm baffled at their involvement, frankly. I don't really understand it.
Okay, so here's all that I know about Sophie and my history with her. These people, I don't understand. It's like this weird parasocial behavior that has rapidly moved. It's like it's dancing on the borderline of obsession, because the moment somebody is like knows a bunch of stuff about you, looks up to you, and I'm not saying that to be arrogant. I'm saying that because I've witnessed this firsthand when people treat you differently because you're a voice actor on a show that literally outside of the hotel the convention is held at, nobody gives a rat's anus about. And it is so weird to me that, and I'm using this as a specific example, and I actually had to go back and research this because I had forgot about it because it meant nothing to me. Sorry, Sophie. I'm not trying to be rude here, but I don't remember that I complimented your snail once. That was something that I did in the moment because I was being friendly and nice, and now somehow I'm getting backstabbed because you decided to tweet out to everybody years ago, the last time you got frustrated that I was in a relationship with Gabe, before we were married and we had announced that we were dating. You said you were worried for your dear friend, your close friend, Claire, me. And I'm sitting here going, who the hell are you? Have I even met you before? Like, what the frick? Then I have to go back and I find out, oh, thank God. I actually did meet her. Okay, so she's not, totally crazy. But then I keep reading this stuff and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is literally it. I complimented your snail one time, and I think I might have DM'd you about a bag that I saw at a convention, and you were at the convention, and and I walked through the vendor hall, and I was like, wow, you have really pretty bags, because one of them had my character on it, and I was like, that's so cool. I think I might have taken a picture of it. And then I was like, hey, how do you sell your bag? I think I DM'd her of like, hey, how do you sell your bags? Like, I might have wanted to retweet that or promote that at some point, right? And I find out that this person is, first of all, has also been kind of a Gabe hater for a while. Like, prior to me being involved in this situation, had one person tell her one thing that was complete hearsay, because this went around at conventions a lot. People were really, I think, pissed that Gabe, had found success, quite honestly. I think that's what it was. And there was this bubbling, underlying level of jealousy, basically, that had kind of started surfacing the more popular that Gabe had got within the fandom. And I think now, because and Saber Spark is another one of those people who are ending up finding success further than outside of the pony fandom, which nobody should freaking care about anymore, by the way. It's over. They're finding success. They're moving on in their lives. They're figuring out what they want to do with their careers. How am I going to pivot? How am I going to, create content? What is it going to look like now? And as they do that and they find success, these freaking bronies, and I hate to use that as an umbrella term because I know that there are plenty of bronies who are out there that are very cool and very sweet, very nerdy, nice people who just, want to have a community and want to make friends. But there's also like very clearly, and I don't think this was always there, by the way. I think that it developed over the years, this like weird like sexual part of the fandom. But before that, it was just like, it was memes and like, oh, we shouldn't be watching this show because it's like for little girls. Haha, that's kind of funny. And that's how a lot of these people fell into it. That's how Aber fell into it. That's how Gabe fell into it. That's how Jeff fell into it. Like all these people, that's how it started. And then they got a little bit popular because they had, content that they were making that people really liked. And then they moved on. And people are somehow so freaking pissed. And Sophie being one of these people who keeps saying things, by the way, make up your freaking mind, Sophie. Is Gabriel successful outside of the pony fandom, or has he reached his peak already? Because you've said both, and you can't just pick and choose when you want to use that as a punching bag for some, I don't know, the end of some point you're trying to make. It doesn't make any sense. He's either successful or he's a has-been. Which one is it? Come back to me and freaking figure it out. But anyway, I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to compliment people on their snails anymore for fear that 7 years down the road, when I become an adult, that they're going to attack me after I've stood up for myself and said, hey, what you're saying is not true about me. And by the way, I'm not a close friend of yours. I don't know who you are.
About an hour and a half ago, I said to you that I didn't want to originally look at this story because I was aware of its connection to the wider Black Griffin allegations. And over the past week or so of looking at this, I realised that I was wrong. This isn't just connected to the Black Griffin allegations, this is the Black Griffin allegations. It's just the next iteration of it. Because the people going after Saber Spark right now are doing so purely because he is friends with Black Griffin. And their motivation isn't whether Saber Spark is innocent or guilty. Their motivation is finding anything they can to stab into any member of this group in their endless crusade against them.
If I'm not mistaken, she did come to you, right?
Brony Fandone was aware of her because Amy had told her about him, or told him about her.
I'm saying that like that person came to you though. You didn't seek them out. It was the other way around.
Yeah, she used Amy. Yeah.
Okay, so that tells me she was aware enough to know about your biases at Saber Spark and just wanted to utilize that.
Brony Fandone is an absolute freak, and I imagine that is painfully obvious to anyone with even a passing knowledge of this drama, but don't worry, the well runs deep with this one. Their history in this community is pretty bizarre. They actually started off running a roleplay account of all things. Earlier on, I mentioned their schizophrenic thread from March, and good lord does this contain some weird lore about them. Allow me to save you some time reading it and just provide you a simple TLDR. Fandome is a narcissistic lunatic whose greatest achievement in life is role-playing as the character Discord, something that essentially occurred accidentally through a meme account connected to their main character. Now, Fandome would describe this as accidentally laying the groundwork to be the most powerful character ever, describing this as a trial by fire, because with great power comes great responsibility. After all, guys, they were still barely a teen. They keep talking about how they were getting bigger and bigger roles, how shocking it was that they had fans they'd meet at conventions. I'm gonna stop here because this is fantasy. I have yet to run into anybody, and yes, I have tried, who was even aware of this person before they started going after Black Griffin. Brony Fandone existed in a very, very niche part of this community. And sure, I get it, if you're a massive loser and you've got a few hundred people paying attention to your weird meme Twitter account, that might mean something to you. But this was Fandome's life. He had nothing else, and then suddenly, the lockdown started to happen. For it was not apathy that killed the bronies, it was a global pandemic. Obviously, the vast majority of the fanbase had already moved on from the show, but cons were still happening, and these seemed to be the only interactions Fandom had with people in the real world. This is obviously just a theory for me, but timeline-wise, I really do think that this is the point where Fandom went from a bit weird to completely fucking insane. I sound like I'm being mean, but this is actually the only defense for Fandom. And it also might answer the question of why he was utilized at all. Because right now we can see Sophie and Amy lying through their fucking teeth about how neither of them thought this was a good idea and Emily was just a bit too erratic. Ladies, your names are all over this. My advice to you would be to shut the fuck up. Yet, I get it. Fandom in this story is by far the worst actor. So when throwing KP to the wolves wasn't quite enough, I guess he has to go as well. Though, as always, I am just happy to help, so let's start with the friend of all three of these people, Wootmaster. Wootmaster, also known as Ezekiel the Zebra, is an artist with a long history of controversy. They actually have some history with Senate, but our focus here is their pornographic material, because Wootmaster shares similar interests to Brony Fandone. Obviously, I don't want to flashbang you with this stuff, I'm not a complete fucking amateur. Fortunately, I don't have to though, because if you want to know what sort of person Woot is, their other major controversy involves their partner, who was a pedophile personally banned by Elon Musk. Woot's history is shockingly well known, and Fandom is constantly bringing them up, even in the DMs with KP. The reason I raise this is A, to show you what sort of person Fandom is, but secondly because it is no coincidence that Fandom is so keen to go after Saber Spark, because Saber has fought with Woot publicly on Twitter. I'm honestly not sure quite how to square the circle between somebody who spends their entire life at the moment trying to out somebody as a groomer while also simultaneously defending their friend who either was or is dating a pedophile, all under a backdrop of this bizarre pornography. And it is interesting, right, that Brony Fandone seems to start going after Claire, the voice actress for Sweetie Belle, the minute she gets into a relationship. It's almost as if this adult woman publicly dating somebody else ruined Fandone's fantasies. And no, I'm not going to show it to you, but Wootmaster did at one point seemingly either draw or retweet pornographic images of Sweetie Belle. Fandone's crusade against Gabe has been long running, but most interestingly about it is how he has treated Claire, because she went from his primary concern to his mortal enemy, even going so far as to deny any abuse she may have suffered from her father. For those not in the know, Claire has been very vocal about having a troubled home life, much of which seems to be dismissed by people who were a fan of her father, as he is the Canadian voice actor for Goku. When all this stuff with Fandom started, Claire just thought it was a dad because he has a history of making fake accounts to basically stalk her and her now husband. There's evidence of him admitting this to her in a recording. Now, many people haven't heard this, it's part of one of the Gabe defense documents and a little bit difficult to access. So, with permission, I'm just gonna play it for you.
Something I would like to say, if you want to talk about Twitter and lying, do you have something to say for yourself, Janice?
Absolutely, yeah. I formed a Twitter handle that, because I didn't think it was appropriate for your to go, what a crock of shit that is, Gabe.
In case that hurts your career, if you do it on your Twitter account?
Oh, no, just because it's kind of human, that's all. And I completely admit to it.
So cyberbullying is human?
I completely admit to it.
Really? But you never told me.
Why would I tell you?
You blocked me on Twitter.
Big deal.
So you didn't want to see me, but you'll tell me.
I'm telling you right now. I'm not.
Why did you block me on Twitter?
I'm not. What do you mean block?
Janice blocked on Twitter.
Fine. Do you want me? I can unblock you, and you know what? Now that it's all in the open, I'll really do it. Because I think.
Did you know about this?
I think that people. No, Mom knows nothing about this. I think that people that need to be called out when they're full of it, and frankly, there's a huge component of his followers that go, what the hell are you tweeting for at 3 in the morning for?
That is very common for him, so I don't know
Yeah,
what
for
you're
him,
doing.
for him. It's not like he's on tour in REO Speedwagon and they're playing gigs till 2 a.m. He's doing nothing.
You are trying to sabotage him and his career and everything about him, and that is the way you're going about it, instead of talking and you're swooving your freaking way around every other possibility that could get you.
And his extra Twitter account said,
Which you denied.
I did not deny it.
Yeah, Gabe sent you a DM, said quit it. I know what this is about. And
Yeah.
you were like, oh, just another hater.
That's not denying anything. I am a hater.
Come back. First of all, you're forced to be quarantined in your fucking room. 5.
I have one more thing to say.
What do you have now?
Why is it that strange?
What is all this bullshit? Oh, I'm gonna go into family therapy like this.
You said family
What a
therapy.
what a
Bullshit.
fucking
You liar.
Fucking liar. It's got nothing to do. I know you're gonna try to equate. Fuck off.
Whatever you think about the Black Griffin allegations, people are just denying this happened to her because it doesn't fit with their narrative. And if you're somebody who claims to care about victims, this seems like a pretty callous and uncaring thing to do. And it has served to silence these people, because why would they speak out? In fact, Black Griffin offered to speak to me, and I realized that was a pointless endeavor and a waste of my time and his, because whatever he said, none of his detractors will believe him. A significant portion of the conversations I have had with Michelle and Claire are in reference to these allegations, but on reviewing it I realised putting it in may be completely pointless. What I will say is both of them have spoken plainly and openly to me about these accusations. That being said, I do think there is one particular use for these conversations, because one thing they serve to highlight is the insane level of A-logging these people have been subjected to over the years. We're talking anything public about these people. It's been trawled through and picked apart by this lunatic to find anything damaging, and I want to show you that through the perspective of Michelle.
With Gabe and Claire, the irony is we've calculated now that Gabe and Claire met outside of conventions roughly 6 to 7 times. And we've gone through all of our photos, all of our videos, like collectively, to calculate accurately how many times it would have been when she was a minor outside of like conventions, and it still would have usually, like, that's including like video shoots. It just happens to be that literally 5 out of 7 of those times were filmed. So to these people, it looks like so much. It was like, those were literally the only times they interacted. And then maybe the other 2 times were my 2 birthdays. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so, the irony is crazy. It's just like, those were literally the only times they saw each other. Oh, and one other time we saw like Book of Mormon, and I don't think we filmed any videos there, but we like posted a picture. So it's literally all these times they're finding, those are the only examples. Like, no more exist essentially.
I don't understand how it's the people who are taking this way too seriously that get so wrapped up in this. And they're like, look at here, they're by themselves. And I'm like, no, we're not. We're with another person. They're right freaking there. And they just take screenshots of, which I think is so funny. The fact that they're like screenshots from videos that I made. And someone's like, please send this to Claire. We can still get her out. There's still time. I'm like, why is your goal that you want me to get divorced? Or is it a step further? Do you want me to freaking marry you? Because that's creepy. You know why? Because unlike Gabriel, you guys have been obsessed with me since I was 13. So maybe think about that the next time you look at yourself in the freaking mirror. Jeez.
So one of the things that people, claim is an inaccuracy that counters reality of how many times, Gabe and Claire spent together and how close friends they were, was Gabe saying we weren't friends. I know Gabe's definition of friends. I know he would not have considered Claire a friend, because he would consider somebody a friend that he had, contact with, phone number. He only had Claire's phone number, I don't know, some point like 2017-ish, because one of her parents gave him, or no, one of her parents gave Claire Gabe's number, and that actually made Gabe really uncomfortable. And I was there when he first received a text from her, and he was like, oh God, why did they give Claire my number? I don't want her to have my number. There were other people are in the room too, so I'm not even the only witness to that. But they, again, we've calculated it specifically. They only spent 6 to 7 times approximately together outside of conventions. And I think, 5 or so of those times were filmed. And there was only one instance during our entire childhood minority period where Gabe and Claire and I, just the 3 of us, were alone. And it's that one video of us going out into the woods. And I deleted it because I felt showing the dead raccoons was inappropriate. I had deleted it like 8 years ago because I just thought it was kind of a gross video. That's literally the only instance. And these people somehow went, I don't even know how they found it. And they thought I deleted it because the comments were inappropriate. It was literally like a super popular video. I deleted it because I just thought it was gross. And I've deleted, I don't know, I unlisted a bunch of videos a long time ago because I was just like, I don't know, we're just kind of being immature. I didn't like showing a pile of 5 dead raccoons on my channel. That just wasn't professional. I was focusing on my music. So I unlisted a bunch of those videos I just thought weren't really, I wouldn't want people to go back and see now just for my own sake. Not because not because the comments were inappropriate of, Gabe's taking 2 young girls out in the woods. We were there for probably an hour and it's 5 minutes away from my house. And both of our sets of parents would have approved it, and literally every other time Claire and Gabe would have ever seen each other when Claire was a minor, parents and many other adults would have been around. Every single time. That's the one video, and they used that one single video that I even deleted and they somehow found, I don't know how, as proof that they spent time alone. It's completely untrue. Completely untrue.
Now, to some of you, this might feel like new information, or flies in the face of what you've been told previously, but there's 2 things I'd like you to keep in mind. Firstly, that the people who are going after this group are really dumb. One of the questions I had, actually, generally, is there's so much focus on Claire being married to Gabe, but these sort of, I don't know, rumors or the way people thought about the relationship started with you. So it's very interesting that they've focused in on Claire. People, they seem to be going, well, we know this person, we care about this person, we want to save this person. And you, who were also involved, kind of get sidelined. And the fact that you don't really know them or have any interactions with them is almost a bit telling that...
Oh, they're basically, they're strangers. Essentially, they're strangers. Yeah. I know nothing about them, they know nothing about us, Maybe Claire's interacted with the specific people a couple more times than me, it sounds. She has more specific memories, but... Yeah, no, I mean, it is interesting too, how many examples and stuff that people have sent me, screenshots where they mix us up too. It'll be some picture 10 years ago, or they think it's Gabe, but it's actually me with my short hair and Claire, just silly stuff that. They can't even tell us apart. It's hysterical.
And secondly, until we reached out, no one has tried interviewing these 2 women, and what makes that particularly insane is not the level of incompetence on display, it's the fact that people like Amy New have direct lines to them, and never thought to ask. Since these new rumours have kicked up, we'll say in the last few years, or the campaign against Black Griffin started, have people tried to actually approach you for your opinion on this, or actually cared what you think? Because it appears with Claire's like, no, this isn't happening, that's not the way any of this occurred, you're wrong. And people have gone, well, of course she thinks that, she's a victim and protecting her husband, and now she's evil. Have you sort of experienced similar stuff, or have you just been sort of sidelined?
And no one's ever asked us. If these people actually were concerned that we were taken advantage of as minors, they've never asked us. They claim to know us. They could have. What do you think? You have our phone number or email? We have peers in common. We have colleagues in common. You really that concerned about us? It's insulting. we're 25-year-old adults. And frankly, they don't have any idea how young we had to become adults as well. So you want to treat us like fully, you know, professional people at the age of 13, paying taxes and like doing all this stuff, having full careers for already, you know, 5+ years. And yet we're too immature to know our own circumstances and our own past and present. It's very... I mean, again, if there weren't all these ramifications for Gabe's career, none of us would care at all. That's why none of us have talked about it for the longest time, because it was always just garbage. You know, why? I'm not going to be offended by something someone says if I don't know them. You know, I don't value your opinion. I don't know you. So only now, I mean, this is probably honestly the last time I'm going to talk about it is with you guys, because I appreciate that you're the first people I've seen that are actually trying to get to the bottom of this. But we all just want to move on. I mean, we're digging up our lives from 10+ years ago because these people who have never even met us claim to know what's happened in our lives, but don't take any weight in our perspective.
After all this time and effort spent silencing people who were actually involved in speaking for the potential victims of Black Griffin, Brony Fandone must have been jumping for joy when Courtney Pete was making a video, and then Lazy Bedhead, and then comes KP and allegations against Saber. Man, April must have looked like a very good month for Fandone. But then, everything begins to fall apart. Fandone had wanted the spotlight, he wanted attention, and when he finally got it, well, that monkey paw curled in a very particular way. So let's have a look at the fallout from his side, and his interesting reactions. We've already gone over much of Fandone's reactions to KP directly, but it bears repeating that the first public statement from the Fandone account came from Sophie, not from Bonk. Bonk's concern lay primarily in the fact that he realised quite quickly that this video might be damaging to the accusations against Saber Spark and DA Games. While he says that he doesn't want to shit on KP and just get people to hate on her, it wouldn't take long before the pressure really started to get to him. Now we're going to skip ahead a bit to when things get interesting around the 12th, because as things had been moving behind the scenes, Bonk wasn't idle. He'd been plotting with Emily to save the sinking ship, becoming increasingly confident that once KP was out of the way, he'd be able to emerge the hero. This would all come to a screeching halt, however, when Saber Spark released his response. Saber, again, has denied these accusations, but more importantly, the video isn't addressed to Emily, focusing more towards KP and Fandone and their devious little schemes. Fandone, at this point, predictably, panics, saying the response would be coming within the next few hours. This response would not come. Most hilariously, he said that he was documenting other people's responses, which further made him a complete fucking laughingstock. And this would just be the beginning of what turned into a god-tier crash-out. Fandom would blame this lack of response on an unnamed drama channel. At the time, I thought this was probably me. It might also be OppBlock, because I do know from her DMs she was watching his streams, but I am named in KP's unhinged voicemail. I'd said to KP that we had very good evidence that it was Emmy, and she should talk to me or at least somebody at this point, given what was unfolding with the situation. Either way, fucking hilarious. Now, at time of recording, the Brony Fandone account is locked, which makes me very grateful for channels like Internet Versus, because this lack of a further statement from Emmy seems to have seriously messed with Fandone's plans. He'd begin wildly lashing out at everyone from KP to Lazy Bedhead, saying he didn't want to hand over power to people like OppBlock. When this didn't work, he basically concedes defeat and moves to a Hail Mary play. Now, one thing you should know about Bonk is at the slightest pressure, this guy will say that he's going to end himself. So against the current insane tirade against him, this ramped up significantly, as he posted a link to a Twitch stream in which he's walking in the rain. Now, I want to be a touch sensitive here, not in deference to Fandone, but this is a topic that touches a lot of people's lives, unfortunately, myself included. For that reason, I take stuff like this pretty seriously, and I get really angry when I think people are baiting this shit for sympathy. Rather, I'd like to focus on the actions of others because despite the shit that Bonk has pulled, there was almost universal concern for his well-being. Multiple people would phone wellness checks, giving out landmarks and identifying information to try and help the police track this guy down and stop him harming himself. Even Sophie would apparently do the right thing, taking access to the account away from Bonk and locking it. And this wasn't just from his friends. Angry Slug and Lyo both made serious efforts to try and protect this guy. The actual wellness check that did the trick apparently came from Baja, somebody who was friends with Bonk but had fallen out with him over his insane takes on pornography. And that's largely the last we've heard of Bonk for the moment. He's apparently in some kind of medical care, which, let's be honest, he desperately needs. But before finishing up with this freak, again, I'd like you to hear Claire's thoughts on the guy who's been harassing her for years. I think it also moves us quite nicely onto Fandom, actually.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Very interesting individual. He started off by being, and again, like, I have no problem answering people's questions if they're genuinely asking me a question. Or if they start, which he did, by saying, this is a situation I'm bringing to light. Claire has been groomed by Black Griffin, also known as Gabriel Brown, and everybody should know about it. And he proceeded with this whole long thread, and I read it, and I was like, oh, this is hilarious. Like, surely people are not, gonna bite on this. And then I saw that, like, enough people were that it started to kind of annoy me. And I was like, what the heck? So I was like, listen, this guy's like, clearly he's been in the My Little Pony fandom for a long time. He definitely knows who I am. And so I feel like I should, kind of make communication with him. And I did. And I said, hey man, like, basically this is, I appreciate the sentiment. I'm okay. What you think is happening is not happening. It didn't happen. And it certainly didn't happen with Michelle either. So could you just, go ahead and problem solved. You don't have to be a hero. I don't need saving, and Michelle doesn't need saving. We're good. None of this happened. I was not groomed, And he just turned immediately and became extremely defensive and didn't care what I had to say after that point, because at that point I had spoken up against what he was saying, and he was not going to have that. This is not somebody who is worried for me, and once I say something on the matter, and this is why it's so annoying when people are like, this person needs to make a statement, this person needs to make a statement. I'm like, why? Because it depends who it's for. If we're talking about people who are my fans know that I'm chilling. My fans follow me on Instagram and Twitter or whatever and see that I'm very happy in my life and my relationship, and I'm fine. And he, I think, got, he was observing this on his other accounts, and me, by this I mean me and Gabe, like, dating. When we had come out and announced that we were dating, we were worried about that because we know that there are some people in this fandom who are, a little bit loony, for lack of a better terminology. And those people are, will spread stuff about you. And that was something that we were like, let's pick our moment, basically. But eventually we were like, you know what, who cares? Like, I am very happy in this relationship. And Gabe was like, I'm very happy in this relationship. We had kind of talked about it, and we're like, yeah, I feel like we can kind of let our followings know. And we have a shared following, but we also have separate following. And it's kind of funny because it's like, when you announce that you're like dating someone seriously, or like getting married, like, you lose a bunch of followers. And for me, I like, I had a lot of people who spoke out, and I got the vibe that they were kind of sad that I was off the market. And I'm like, okay, no offense, but like, as if you had a shot. Like, that's just kind of, some of the people in the fan base are like that. But then there were other people who were super happy for us, and they were like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. Like, I'm a fan of both of you. That's so fun. Like, I love seeing people who are like-minded, get together, and like, man, you guys are gonna be power couple. So like, that was really nice. But like, this where Brony Fandone lies is one of those loony people, and no matter what I said, I realized talking to him directly was literally met with fire every single time. I'm like, is there a way that you like, I don't know why you're doing this. I don't know why you feel like you have to. Like, I don't know what else I can say to like alleviate your concerns. And then I started realizing, oh, these aren't concerns. This is now an attack. And then I had speculated actually for a while that this could have been my own dad, because my dad has done stuff like this before. The language was very similar. I had alluded to some, sassy remarks I made with Brony Fandone's this account. And I was just trying to kind of gauge the waters, and I'm like, yeah, I found out that it wasn't him, and I was like kind of relieved, but I also was kind of mad because I was like, well, dang, now we just have like another crazy person with the same kind of mentality, and they just want Gabe deplatformed. And I actually DM'd them, and I had a whole conversation with him where I was like, all right, like, I'm gonna level with you, dude. Like, I don't know what your goal is here or your game, but I'm fine, and I don't know like why you're so angry about this still. Like, and it seems like you're more angry the fact that I've come out and I've said like this is not true now. But the whole conversation, I mean, if you even can read it, he posted it like a while ago, but it was basically like he said like you shouldn't have a relationship with minors if you're an adult at all. And then I got curious and I started doing some research, and from literally like almost no effort at all of research, I was like, oh, okay, this person had like a role-playing account. They deleted a bunch of stuff that they used to like communicate with me, that is like no longer on X anymore. But they used to communicate with me. So I'm like, so what is it that you feel so guilty or bad about talking to minors? Not even adding the words sexually to this or inappropriate. Literally just, you cannot talk to minors. And so it was very creepy to me, quite honestly, that he started saying stuff like this. And the more that he was saying that, then I started looking into it, and I was like, okay, the full con thing, like, I'm sorry, if you're normalizing, I don't care what it is, if you're drawing a freaking cabinet and you're sexually attracted to a cabinet and you say that the cabinet is 4 years old, that's really creepy. I don't care what that thing is. If it is underage and it is being sexualized and you're buying or commissioning that as porn, that is predator behavior. And I think that he's totally projecting, because I don't know. I know that I don't like just like throwing things around, especially because I know what it's like to have these words thrown at me and my own husband, but that's pretty pedophilic behavior. And it's normalizing, sexualizing young people and children, and it's disgusting. There's no loophole there. You don't get to defend why your thing is slightly different and not okay and not hurting people. Well, guess what, Brony Fandone? You're hurting me. How about that? You're hurting me. Now you've hurt one person. So is that going to make you stop getting commissioned freaking underage cartoon porn? Probably not, because there's going to be something else that you're going to defend about it the next time. I'm sick of this. So sickening.
This story is one of the weirdest things I have ever covered. When I began, I expected it to be a fairly simple tale about some girl who had a grudge against another content creator and was prepared to go to any lengths to ruin him. I did not expect to be having conversations with the voice actresses from My Little Pony and dealing with a conspiracy to ruin their lives that seemingly has been running for years now. But as we've got through all the conspirators, I guess it's time for some final thoughts on this entire mess. Firstly, let's return to KP. During my interviews with her, I said I didn't really know where I came down on whether this was malice or stupidity, and I actually don't know really if that's changed. I think it's probably decent quantities of both. One thing I will point out is KP has been very forthcoming with information and does seem legitimately remorseful. Whether these are genuine feelings, a response to being thrown under the bus, or an attempt to avoid being sued into oblivion, I'll leave up to you. But what I've experienced with KP largely lines up with what other people have said to me about her. She is fairly lost and fairly clueless, turning up to our first conversation kind of baked. So it doesn't come as a surprise to me that when I came back to her to ask about Chris, she'd ask me this.
Are you cool with me coming to process to you, like, in general? Like, I don't know. I don't want to look at anything that's going to trigger me, and then Lyle won't tell me anything because he's afraid he's going to trigger me.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, again, I want to be clear that I am making a video on you. So I think there's that separation. I'm no one's therapist. For those of you looking for some repercussions to hit KP, and I don't blame any of you for that position, this kind of thing is devastating to a channel. I'm really not sure how you actually come back from something like this. And to be honest, the real damage that's been done to her is she has basically burnt all her bridges with her old remaining friends. And my final thought on this really is that the only person who can judge KP fairly is Saber Spark and how he feels about the shit she pulled. As a core point to this entire thing, if there is a lesson to be learned, it is about evidencing the claims we are making as creators. And I have actively avoided including claims that I couldn't in some way substantiate either with evidence or additional testimonies. I have now heard the other side of the allegations being made by Emily, but I have largely dodged around talking about them and her for a very simple reason. It is not fair to me or to you as an audience for me to be presenting takes that will clearly have been biased by what I now know. As long as Saber is off the record and I have been clear about this with him, I cannot use what he tells me, and to his credit, he wouldn't want me to. But one thing that was pointed out to me by Lazy Bedhead is that I clearly, from the start, had issues with these allegations, and she felt me not highlighting this previous bias made me slightly disingenuous. But my Twitter hasn't gone anywhere, and I was tweeting out about this on May the 2nd before I'd even begun looking at this in earnest. So, for the sake of transparency, let's just go over my thoughts and why I had issues with this to begin with. My primary problem with these allegations, having gone over many like them over the years, is that, to me, Emily tells on herself. My exact comments were, unless there is more, Saber is autistic and led her on, for like a year mind, talking about a relationship, which is shitty, but not cancel-worthy. Plus people are just glossing over the fact that this is seemingly multiple meetings and convos, which adds a lot of grey to this. And when we come to the actual statement, we can find that Emmy is talking about being demisexual, multiple comments about Saber mentioning a relationship, and also talking about how she needed to get over her crush because she felt her emotions were being toyed with. To me, and this is just my opinion, this statement reads far more like somebody who was pissed off and has been pissed off for years that the guy she liked decided not to date her. And I say this because my experience has been that people tell on themselves, often unable to omit their actual reasons for taking a particular course of action. This is, of course, me just explaining my biases and my tweets on this particular situation. We all undeniably have these biases, whether you are on the listen and believe all victims side or the evidence or it didn't happen side. Truthfully, most people are going to fall somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. The issue only really comes when people are trying to ruin each other's lives based on hearsay. And once again, hopefully for the final time now, I don't know the truth behind these allegations. Whether it is Saber Spark or Black Griffin, nobody does except for the people directly involved. I am also not unsympathetic if there are real victims and the well has been poisoned because the people who were handling those claims have been brutally discredited. In fact, you'll notice that I barely talk about the DA Games accusations, because from what I've seen of it, it might have some legs, and because KP's video is so bad, that particular well has yet to actually be poisoned because most people don't even realize that that's what her video was about. So if there is something there, I hope somebody competent looks into it. If you've enjoyed this content, please hit the buttons below the video. It does help the channel and I do appreciate it. Thanks to all our current subscribers and members, particularly those at molding level: Shelly May, Based Hoz, Sivance, Letters of Sky, Corvus Cabal, Rotting Brain, Dr. Zeus Hippo, Stationary Name, Hey It's Lizzie, and Star Sprinter. But before I go, I want to leave you with one thing, which is admittedly kind of just for me, because there is an absurdly famous Brony clip which has lived rent-free in my head for years.
However, as most of us are aware, there's a darker side to Fandom which we know pretty well. To Mrs. Oliver and Miss Libman.
Great.
Alright, so I'm pretty sure you're aware of Princess Celestia being portrayed as a tyrant, an internet troll, and God forbid, a molester.
And the reason I have to bring this up is because the young lady on stage, sat next to Peter New, funnily enough, is Michelle. And I actually did ask her about this. A panelist gets up on stage and asks you about your opinions on Princess Celestia being depicted as a tyrant, an abuser, and a molester. Do you have any memory of this?
Zero. I'm telling you, I have zero memories from conventions, almost at all. They all blur together.
I even showed it to her, and she couldn't even identify which convention it took place at, which, if anything, kind of wraps this story up quite nicely. These events from a decade or so ago mean so much to so many people, but for those involved, this was just their job. As always, more content to come. Peace.